The Singing of the Dead by Dana Stabenow. Read by Marguerite Gavin. This one is for Karl Mars, high school heartthrob, longtime friend, and the man who makes things happen. The only way I can lose this election is if I'm caught in bed with a dead girl or a live boy. Edwin Toms, Governor of Louisiana. Birth announcement. Melun, France, from the Melun Journal, 13 Juin, 1875. Né à Léon Marc-Louis Beauchamp, FM. Engin, fille. Léonie Angélique Josephine Beauchamp. Dawson City, December 24th, 1897. She walked out on stage wrapped in 50 yards of sheer white chiffon, a pair of high-heeled shoes with jeweled buckles, and nothing else. There was a second of stunned silence in the packed, smoky saloon, before deafening and prolonged approval threatened to raise the roof. She waited, a faint smile on her face, for the first roar to moderate and pitched her voice to be heard. "Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the Double Eagle's Christmas Eve auction." Her voice was husky, with the slight hint of an accent she tried to control. She let her smile broaden, giving it her special up-from-under and through-the-lashes look, part Madonna, part whore, all woman, and added, "I'm the best present you'll ever find under any Christmas tree you ever saw." This time the stage literally trembled beneath her feet, and she gave a fleeting thought to all the gold dust spilled on the floor this night, now being shaken through the cracks in the floorboards. It wouldn't go to waste. Japanese Jack and Big Ben Benston would crawl beneath the building the next morning to sweep it up and add it to the night's till. Likely she wouldn't see her percentage, but at the moment she couldn't allow herself to be distracted by that realization. Big Ben was the owner and Japanese Jack the bartender of the Double Eagle Saloon. Doors open around the clock, at the corner of Front and York Streets in downtown Boomtown Goldtown, Dawson City. The Double Eagle was the biggest building in Dawson, the first to add on a second story. It had a long mahogany bar that matched the mahogany wainscoting, 8 mahogany gaming tables, a polished brass footrail that matched the brass spittoons, large, elaborate paintings of reclining nudes lit by tiered crystal chandeliers, windows made of stained and beveled glass, and a dozen rooms upstairs with thick carpets, many more mirrors, and furnished with suites in the very latest style. A cleaning staff of a dozen kept the place spotless, although they kept leaving to stake claims in the search for their very own El Dorado. They were all men, the cleaning staff. Women could do so much better, selling dances for $1, a pint of champagne for $18, an hour in one of the rooms upstairs for considerably more. Big Ben got 50 cents on the dance dollar, 3/4 of the price of the pint of champagne, and she never told anyone what the split was on the third. She had been headlining there for the past year, specializing on stage in the flame dance that kept 200 yards of chiffon in the air at one time, and specializing in what one reporter called the long, juicy waltz in the clubrooms upstairs. At the end of 14 months, she had $27,000 in the bank. She was 22 years old, although she admitted to 19, and it was her great good fortune that she looked even younger than that. Most laboring men outside, of any age, were lucky to earn $1 a day. She could have kept working for years, especially here, where men outnumbered women 6 and 7 to 1, but she had plans, big ones. One more winter, one last contribution to her savings, and she would be ready to move on. She looked around the room, at the sea of faces upturned to her, and felt that thrill of power she always felt at being the center of so much concentrated male attention. The chiffon began in a spiral of fabric at her ankles and finished up in a graceful swath around her shoulders, the loose end draped over her bare arm. So closely bound together were her feet that she could take only tiny, mincing steps, which was just as well given the height of the heels on her shoes. Big Ben had wanted her to go barefoot, but she knew what the heels did to the line of her legs, displaying their graceful and well-turned length to best advantage, making a man imagine them wrapped around his waist. One miner had fought his way forward to the edge of the stage. He was ragged, bearded, and smelled as if he hadn't bathed since the river froze over. He looked hungry, and so very hopeless. She gave him a special smile all his own, inviting everything, promising nothing. She was a whore, but she was an honest whore. She gave value for money received, so long as the money was received. That didn't mean she couldn't be kind. "It's going to be a long, cold, lonely winter, boys," she said, and there was a shout of agreement. She walked down to center stage and out onto the catwalk, thrusting into the room, the little mincing steps causing her breasts to shimmy. The tuft of hair at the V of her legs was a shadowy patch beneath the chiffon. She put a little extra into the roll of her hips to underline just what was on the auction block that evening. "For me, too," she added, pouting, and they howled like wolves on the scent. Again she felt the thrill, a flush of power that began somewhere low in her belly and spread up her torso and down her limbs. A faint film of perspiration broke out over her skin, and a commensurate low, prowling growl rose from the crowd. She performed a three-quarter turn and paused to cast a roguish glance over her right shoulder. "We have a saying here in the North Country, boys. I know you've heard it. The odds are good, but the goods are odd." She winked a violet eye at one man standing in the back, watching her over a glass of Big Ben's watered-down whiskey. He was a regular of hers, a banker who was as conservative with his own money as he was acquisitive of others. He hadn't liked the idea of his favorite dance partner taking herself out of circulation for the entire winter, but then he wouldn't be bidding this evening either. She had no doubt that he was ready to take her evening's earnings in deposit, however, just as soon as it had been paid over and Big Ben's commission deducted. She let one hand skim suggestively down her cocked hip, reminding him of what he'd be missing. His eyes narrowed against the smoke of the cigar clenched in his teeth, and she laughed her husky laugh. "I'm sure you'll agree, these goods aren't the least bit odd." Big Ben and Japanese Jack had been priming the bidders for the last week, with announcements of the auction, including tantalizing hints as to exactly what skills and services the highest bid would bring. The flyers were papered all over town, and every claim from Log Cabin to Circle City. The always needy miners of the Klondike had been quivering for days at the prospect of the Dawson darling dancing the slow, juicy waltz just for them for 6 exquisite months. No one would notice the dark or the cold with the Dawson darling waiting in his bed. "Here I am, gentlemen," she said. "It is generally held that my looks are pleasing and that my figure is good." She waited for the chorus of agreement and was not disappointed. "What are my terms?" She tossed the end of chiffon over her shoulder, where it trailed behind her like the train of a wedding dress, as she walked down stage again. She came to the end of the catwalk and met the fierce blue eyes of a tall, blond man standing near the double doors. In a room full of men who wanted her without reservation, the biting intensity of his look gave her pause. But she rallied and held his gaze, a definite challenge in her own. "Terms. Well, I'm willing to sell myself tonight to the highest bidder, to act as his wife, in word." She paused delicately. And indeed, there was another roar. "For the next 6 months, from this night, December 25th, until June 25th. "Start the bidding," yelled one man, who had yet to look above her chin. "Yeah, stop talking and start bidding." "But," she said, raising one white, well-tended hand without breaking away from the stare of the blue-eyed stranger, "I reserve the right to accept the next lowest bidder if I do not like the highest." Her
Sample complete. Ready to continue?